Hello, sports fans. I'm Mike Beaton, and this is Mic'd Up Sports, the talk show that goes in depth with the people who build our sports community. We continue our conversation with Alexis-Gray Lawson, head coach for Como Park girls basketball and a former professional athlete. Speaking of the pros, did you know Diana Taurasi played a part in naming Alexis's dog? We take a bite into the details. Speaking of the time and the film and all of those sessions, you did that for 2 seasons in the WNBA. You were drafted by Washington, didn't make the cut there, but Phoenix called you up. Do you recall that experience of getting drafted or getting a sense that you had an opportunity to play professionally?
Yeah, I mean, I remember that day. I remember at the time, I can remember like that my senior year, the beginning of the year, I had gotten preseason All-American honors, and everyone was talking about how it was going to be a high pick. And so the year kind of didn't turn out the way that I wanted to. We were really young. Obviously, we did not make the tournament that year. We made the WNIT. And so we won the WNIT that year, but you can kind of tell things were kind of going to be lopsided a little bit. And then I win the Francis Pomeroy Award, right? Mm-hmm. And so you would be like, oh, shoot, like she's back, she's back in that mix.
All Pac-10 first team, I think, 2 years, and that was after your Rookie of the Year
campaign.
I
mean, I had a pretty decent year when you look at it, like from that standpoint. So I thought, well, I at least am going to be a first-round kid, or I'm going to be a second-round kid. And then I dropped to the third round, and I'm like sitting on the couch, and my eyes are just like, what is going on, right? And I think every kid has that moment. Uh-huh. And then I get drafted by Washington, and Coach Boyle says, Lex, like, don't worry about it. Just go to camp, play well, do what you need to do, right? And so I go to camp, and I'm playing against Mattia Ajavon, Lindsey Harding. I'm trying to find a spot with those two. I think that's pretty hard for any rookie to kind of come in and try to take a spot from either one of them, right? Like,
and they had a good year that year, if I recall.
Yep.
I think they had like the best record and then got upset, but
so
it's a pretty tall order.
Exactly. And so when I got cut, I came back home. And I contemplated, like, is this really something that I really want to do? Because I never felt really disappointment like that. That was a different type of disappointment. And it's funny, I always say, like, you know, you tell God what you're going to do, and then God shows back up and says, ha ha, yeah, I got something else.
The saying is, we make plans, God laughs.
Right. And so that's exactly what happened. I had my own plan. I was like, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. And people, I think, forget that we're humans first, too. And so as a young person, you're still trying to find yourself and figure out who you're going to be, what you want to do. You know, how does that fit with basketball? How do you manage money? How do you manage time? You know, when you come from a neighborhood like mine, or you come from, you know, a situation where, you know, you don't have generational wealth, you have no idea how to save. You have no idea what it means to, I guess, quote unquote, like, be a good steward of things, right? Like, you just want to live in that moment. And I think as a young kid, that's exactly what I was doing. And next thing I know, I'll go overseas. I kind of have the same experience where for most people, the experience is, oh my God, you know, I'm going to go over there, I'm going to play well, and then I'm going to go off and do good things, right? For me, I sat the bench, which I had never done before. So here's this dynamic where I was successful at Cal, successful in high school, and now I have to sit on someone's bench behind players where, you know, I'm like every other player at that time. Oh, I'm better than the person that's in front of me, right? Like, everybody has that aha.
I feel the same way, even in the broadcasting realm, and not like, oh, I can show you the ropes, but you know, you want to bet on yourself.
You always want to bet on yourself, right? And so I sat the bench until we played Fenerbahce. And at that time,
they were, I think, they had like one of the strong overseas programs, if I recall. I think Taurasi, didn't she play for them?
Yep. So they had Diana and Penny on that team.
Oh, yep.
And that was my first game, and I said we were probably like down. I would say like maybe 15. And my coach, he looks at me, he looks away, And I'm like, dude, just give me a chance. Like, we can't get no worse right now, right? He puts me in the game, and the first play, I remember Diana comes down, and she's talking mess to me.
Sounds like DT.
And I remember me saying, dude, like, you don't want this. Now I'm saying this to Diana Taurasi, and at the time you laugh at it, right? Because you're like, what? Like this, and so I think it caught her off guard, and so she was like, okay. She came down, and she tried to get to the basket, and I fouled her, super hard on purpose, right? Because where I come from, you're not getting nothing easy. Like you can score on me all you want to, but you're not gonna get it easy, right?
Like you're gonna have to earn it at the line.
Yep. And she was like, okay. So she shoots her free throws. I come down and I score my first points, right? So we're going back and forth probably for a good 3 minutes, and we're getting back into the game. My coach takes me out, right? And I don't think I saw the floor any other time during the game. And I remember after the game, I got a chance to talk to her and Penny. Now, these are people that you idolize growing up, right? And, I remember when she was at UConn, and she was everything to every player.
Big in Australia.
So I'm sitting here as a professional having a conversation with these two, right? And then the next thing I know is a month later, I tear my meniscus, and I'm like, okay, I get to go home. Like I'm not sitting on anyone else's bench. I go home, and a week later I get a call from Corey Gaines, like, you want to come to Phoenix and work out for me? Sure. When do you want me to be? He's like, 3 weeks. And mind you, I just had surgery. So I'm like, oh God. So I went through the process. And he was like, you remind me of somebody. And he was like, you remind me of Cappy. And I was like.
And she had just left at that point.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. So he was like, I'm going to give you a chance to come to camp. And, I knew that Phoenix was good for, if you were the best, you were going to make the team, right? Because they had just given the opportunity to Taylor Lilly, who I had known forever because it's Pac-10 love, right? I had played against Taylor a whole bunch of times. And I get to camp, and I have probably one of the best camps that I could have asked for. And then, that kind of starts everything off for me.
How surreal was it to go up against Diana and Penny Taylor, and then just a few months later, now you're teammates? So did Diana tease you about that little smack talk?
No. Like Diana, I think she just like kind of has like this out of sight, out of mind, type of thing.
Everything she does, she leaves it on the floor. Yeah. I mean, I've interviewed her in locker rooms, and she is not that Diana Taurasi that people see. No, and I respect her for that.
She gets such a bad rap for it, right?
Fans give her a hard time all the time, and I always had to tell them, like, that's the Diana you see on the court, but she leaves it on the court. I mean, she has a highly professional attitude, and
Diana is probably,
and she still has no filter. But
she is really for me as a rookie, like she took care of me. When I after practice, when I was ready to go home, I had to stay and get up shots with her, which I thought was super cool. For you to take the time to really try to invest some time into me, I thought was pretty incredible, right? And then we go into the locker room, right? And this was the best moment ever. So me and her were the same shoe size. And
little known fact. She's like 6 feet, you're 5'8".
Yep.
So apparently,
I have some
all
very
your
large
growth,
feet, for whatever reason.
Your growth went in the other direction.
Yes, it definitely did. But I'll never forget. So she. We were all sitting there, we're talking about Louis and Gucci, right? And so, again, I'm a kid from Oakland. We don't wear Louis and Gucci. Even if we could afford it, we probably still wouldn't wear it, right? And so they're all talking about their designer bags. And she had asked me, she said, do you own anything that's less? I said, no. I can't afford it. I'm not going to buy it, right? And the next day, she brings me back some Louis shoes. It was my first pair of Louis Vuitton shoes. And I was like taken back. I was like, this is super cool, right? And literally a couple weeks later, I ended up getting, she has a schnauzer, a little brown schnauzer. I actually have a brown schnauzer as well. So is Tamika.
Tamika Johnson?
Yep. So it's actually me and Tamika's dogs are brothers. So I didn't plan on getting the dog, but she wanted a dog, and we ended up seeing this litter, and he was like, in this little thing. And so I was like, I'm not buying a dog. So she ended up buying a dog. Her best friend bought a dog, and the dog was just left there by its lonesome. So I was like, I got to take the dog. And I named him Louis after the first pair of Louis that Diana gave me. And I still have Louis.
So your shoe game's really on point.
Yep.
Was that your favorite memory, or were there some other fun stories? Because you didn't maybe rack up stats the way Diana has or the way Penny did, but you got to play for 2 years. You got to play alongside a couple of Olympians, a couple of legends. So was that your best memory, or were there some other ones that you were glad to have the opportunity?
I've had a whole bunch of memories with, a lot of them. And, they're, like I said, Candace Dupree, all those guys are pretty incredible,
Dupree, she's like the one person who is money from 15 feet, all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously known Diana for a really long time, since middle school. And so, being able to to hang out with them and spend time with them and have conversation with them was pretty cool. I think that people take for granted the conversations and relationships that you build with people. And for me, I cherish those relationships, and I was grateful for every moment that, people allowed me to just be in their presence and learn, to be able to soak in a lot of stuff. Being able to sit down and have a conversation with Corey, for example, sparked me to want to be a coach because of the way that his brain works. It works a lot like mine worked. And his thought process and how he did practice was a lot of the stuff that I do in practice. So, yeah.
And I know for a few years after your WNBA days were over, folks would come up to you and ask if you could still play, because you would watch the games. Of course, your cousin still plays, Chelsea Gray, for the Los Angeles Sparks. So can you still play?
I can still go. I can still go. I keep telling them, it's funny because my first year I had Andrea, obviously. And so there was nobody physically that could guard Andrea. So in order to push her in practice, I had to guard her every day. She had to guard me every day. So it forced her to get better, right? And so
how hard was she to guard?
It wasn't that hard. It wasn't that hard. It's funny because Andrea is a lot like me when I was in high school. With a better jump shot.
You're talking about overnight sensation.
Yeah.
She was a huge star when I covered her for games on YouTube.
Yeah.
Couldn't get enough Andrea. I remember one of my camera guys, he came after a game where she beat De La Salle, and he was giving her the royal salute, and he told me afterwards it's because she doesn't play like a girl.
No.
And I don't say that as a knock, but like you said, the way she plays, I could see.
It's physical.
She's
she's
real shy outside the court, but put her in there, and I've never seen someone get as pumped as she can.
Yeah, she is probably one of those people where, you don't have to push her to want to get in the gym, right? You don't have to push her to do those little things. I think, Drea's biggest thing was learning how to become the best all-around player, right? It's the getting the extra rebounds. I remember that year, everybody complained about, she was scoring 30 points a game the year before.
Yep.
And then it dropped. Yeah, it dropped to 22 or something like that a game.
Michaela, I think, was coming up, so
yeah. So it was it was this
she was
weird
trying
mix.
to get pressure off of herself.
It was
there.
this weird mix. It was her assists went up, her rebounds went up.
Yeah.
And then here comes the emergence of Michaela as well. So it was this crazy dynamic that helped kind of set up. Every year that happens, something, that level point happens. Same thing with Michaela. Her last year, it went from where she's shooting the ball at a high level, and then now it drops off a little bit because now you have these kids that come out of nowhere that are 8th graders that are now taking some of that, right? And so that'll happen to them eventually too,
Same thing happened with Sarah Scalia too this past season when Liza Carlin moved over to Stillwater. So how does this kid from Oakland that spent a couple of years in Phoenix, how did you end up here?
I got married. I got married.
And I'm taking your spouse had say on where you're going to go?
No, actually, it's weird. I remember she's actually from here. And so she said,
Did you meet here?
We did meet here.
Okay. Was this after a game?
No, it was for my birthday. I came out here for my birthday. Now that's probably the most weirdest thing that anybody does is come to Minnesota for their birthday, but I did.
I don't know. I've lived here all my life.
Yeah,
I
I came to Minnesota for my birthday, and we had a mutual friend, and we met through a mutual friend, and me and her actually became really good friends before we actually dated. And one thing led to another. We got married, and the rest is history.
So you move here, so you almost have to start over because you don't have the resources or the connections that you did in California. And of course, your coach, Corey Gaines, and DT and Penny, they were still in Phoenix.
Right.
So what was your first coaching job? How did you get your first coaching job here? And then how did that lead into Como Park? Because if I recall, you were an assistant at De La Salle before taking the Como job.
Yep. So I actually had a friend who I was actually introduced to, so Nita Kellogg, she actually does Project Diva and all that stuff, which is pretty incredible. So if you get a chance, definitely check it out. But she was really good friends with Faith Patterson, and so
The matriarch.
yeah. So it was this weird dynamic. So literally the first day that me and Faith met, it was like we were a match. We were literally like the same person. You're
just a little younger.
Just a little younger. But her thought process I thought was so dope. The way that she thought about basketball, the way that she pushed her kids, it inspired me to want to be better every single day. And I remember just being able to sit down and have conversations with her just about, life and the transition. Because the transition part was hard for me, from the player to the coach. That was very difficult. I think it's probably difficult for most young coaches because your expectation is for everybody to be at a high level at all times, and it doesn't go off that high level. If it ever drops, they're in trouble, right? So it was good to see that the dynamic was a lot different. And she had some amazing coaches with her. So to be able to learn from those guys that first year, and then actually she introduced me to Patrick Adams. And that was actually the first time I met Andrea too. And she says, I want you to go help out this AAU team.
Charity Warriors?
Charity Warriors. And I said, okay. And so Pat was like, come on over, blah, blah, blah. And we had talked on the phone, and we met. I was coming into the gym, and most people think that I look super young. So when I came in the gym, all the kids were staring me down. They thought I was trying out, and he did too. So Pat actually came up to me and he was like, "Hey baby, what's your name? Like, are you trying to come and play?" And I'm like, "No, I'm supposed to be here to coach, I think." And he was like, "Oh," he was like, "Man, you look so young."
Like, you and I are the same age, but you must have good genes because I turned into Jean-Luc Picard.
Man, and I was just like, okay, cool, like whatever, no big deal. And then, that's kind of where that began. And then John Robinson, who was the girls coach over at Como, decided to go to the boys side. And so I really didn't know about the job opening at all until, it was closed. And Pat says, "Hey, I want you to talk to Teresa, and because I think that you should really, look at being at Como." And I'm just like, I don't know if I want to do high school basketball. Like, I knew I wanted to be a college coach, but I wasn't sure I wanted to do high school. And so we had this infectious conversation, and the next thing you know, I'm the new head coach at Como.
And what was that transition like? Because you came in, Andrea was going to be a senior, and as we said, she had just came off a season where she led the state in scoring, so her stock value went up. But at the same time, I remember Patrick telling me out of how shocked he was that his family friend John decided to move over to the boys team. So on their end, they're going through this range of emotions. Of course, the results speak for themselves now. But how did you approach this job, and what philosophies did you imbue on this team that you think have helped Como Park stay a contender 4 years later?
So I think that everybody thinks of success different. The one thing that I will never forget, my dad and my dad is like a philosopher. So my stepdad is like the cool, calm, collective one, right? And my dad is like the philosopher, right? And so my dad says to me all the time, like, success is what you put in every single day and you'll get the result. And so I really just wanted to teach them hard work. That's really all I really wanted to do, and I figured everything else would kind of work itself out. And so we went crazy that summer. That summer was like, we had 6 a.m. workouts. Some days at 5 a.m. workouts. We were doing hill workouts. We were doing just a variety of things. And I think the parents kind of latched on and was like, oh, she's about business. Like, we really maybe got something here. And then, we win the first game of the season, and then it kind of like the success kind of followed. And I think everybody kind of saw their games transition a lot differently because I deal with all of our players very, very separately. And so I had a lot of time, especially at that time. So I was like literally doing one-on-one work with Drea and Michaela and, all these players. And then on top of that, I had, Brian, he was coming in to train a lot of the kids as well. So
Brian Pearson?
Yep. So it was like this crazy dynamic of different stuff that was happening. And we just success came from really the hard work. And when you think about it, like as much work as we put in the summertime, my thought to them is, well, when it's 2 minutes like left on the clock, right? You think about all the stuff that you had to get to get to this point. It's going to push you to want to go past that point because you know that you've done all this work to get to this point, that you don't want to stop. You don't want to lose this moment. And I think that kind of propelled us that whole year.
Right, first state tournament appearance in school history, and since then 320-win seasons, dethroning St. Paul Central, who had dominated the conference. But I remember when I covered Como the year before you came in, when Andrea was putting up all those big numbers, and then the year you took over, I just saw, in my view, a stronger sense of accountability and even just physicality in the sense that this team just looked stronger, and when they came up against higher level opponents, they weren't getting run out of the building. I think that win over De La Salle was a highly telling one as far as what you were instilling with that team. And so I don't know if what I'm saying lines up with your perspective, but how do you think you turn that program into a solid contender? They had some good performances that year before, but since then, look out for Como.
I mean, for me, it really was just about pushing us to the limit. And how do we get better? We always talk about accountability as coaches. I always think that the word is so funny because we say it so much that I think that people think different things.
They kind of become desensitized.
Yeah. But accountability really that means you as a coach have to be accountable for your actions, for the things that come out of your mouth, the things that you prepare for, right? And people always ask like, what is it that you do, right? And I'm crazy about this game. My brain never shuts off, which is probably half of the problem sometimes.
I go to the same
Yeah,
thing.
it just never
schedules and
oh my God.
Can November get here already?
It never shuts off. It for me it's always that cycle of how do I make sure that I'm the best coach for this group, right? Because it always bothers me when coaches don't change, right? I'm one of those coaches, I change with what I have. Because the reality is, if you have the same playbook for the same kids, it doesn't work. Like, the stuff that I run for Drea, I can't run for Michaela. They're two different players. The stuff that I ran for Michaela, I can't run for Ronnie. So the game has to change. And so my thought every year is, what could I have done better to prepare my team better for this situation? And that's how I, groom my kids to think, like, what could I have done? Not what did my teammates do, what did my coaches do, or I didn't get to play this many minutes, or I didn't get to do this. If you're accountable for your own actions and you do what you need to do, then everything else works itself out. And those are life lessons, right? Those are things that we take with us after basketball. And that's what this is all about for me. It's when they leave Como, I need them to go up and show up in this world and do big things in this world so that they can come back to this community and give back and do the things that they need to do. That's why those things are important. That's why accountability is important. Making sure that you're on time, right? So if I say practice is at 10, we're there at 10:45. I mean, there at 9:45, right?
It's like the line from Coach Carter.
Yeah, it's the truth.
2:55, you're late.
My coaches felt that way. Coach Boyle was like, if practice is at 10, you don't get there at 10. You get there at 9:45. You get there at 9:30. My mom used to always say for interviews, if your interview is at 10, you get there at 9:30 so you can prepare your mind and your body for what you're about to go through, right? It's all those things that's going to help set them up for success as Division I athletes or as, working people. And, we're not, I think the scope of being a basketball coach is so much more than what it was, 10, 20 years ago. Now it shouldn't be just about the basketball. It can't be, right? It has to be that we're training these guys to be great women and that we're setting them up for success for long term.
Now, it's only been 4 years since you took over the Como job, but that list of players who you've mentored, it's a growing one. Andrea Adams, Michaela Van Nett, both playing college ball. Now you've got KK Asbury, Ronnie Porter, Jada James, Shania Nichols, and there's probably a few others. That group, that core, all I got to say is look out. But how have those players, how have they shaped you? How have they helped you evolve and grow as a person? Because as much as you talk about preparing them for that next level, I have to imagine all of these players have rubbed off on you. Remember, you were telling me how Andrea reminded you of yourself.
Yeah. You think of all the things that you wish that you would have known in high school or in college or, professionally, and I try to teach them. They are replicas of who I am and what I represent. Como is a lot like my high school and the mixture of kids that go to Como. And those kids, whether it be my basketball players, because I work at Como too, so whether it be kids in the hallway, their space is infectious. I always use that word infectious because it's true. Like their love and support is infectious. I love my players. We may not always get along. They may not like me at times, but I love them like they were my own kids. They help prepare me to be a mom to Job, and I think it's easier said than done at times where you feel frustrated as a coach, especially as a young coach. You feel, am I good enough? Am I teaching them the right things? When they get frustrated with you, am I being too hard on them? And I always call my mom because, your mom is the person that's going to give you the most criticism about who you are and what you represent, right? And my mom's like, well, there's a way that you can say it because sometimes I come off a little harsh at times, right? I talk to my wife and she'll go, be nicer. Be nicer, be kind, be more kind, change how you're saying it. Maybe have someone else say it. So I got some pretty awesome women in my life that kind of help me to change some things that I need to change as a coach and developmental piece. But yeah, my kids are great. They teach me things new every day. I told you that I'm trying to figure out Snapchat. That's their thing. But yeah, they inspire me to want to be better every single day. You see the work that they put in and it makes me want to go even harder because you're like, they get it. I don't have to force them to be places they want to be there because they know it's best for them, and that's really all you can ask for as a coach.
And one of the more amusing aspects about you coming up here is that you are probably one of the few basketball fans in Minnesota that maybe wasn't so hot about the Lynx dynasty because their last title came against the Sparks, so they got it at the expense of your cousin. Now the Sparks had won the year before, and I think in 2015, the Lynx also knocked the Sparks out. So have folks given you any smack talk or a hard time about
my
how
players,
your players?
It's funny because they grew up as Lynx fans, right? And being in Phoenix, it's hard to be a Lynx fan. It really is. It's one of those things where
because they knocked you out in 2011.
Yeah.
If I recall.
Yep. So yeah, it's hard to be a Lynx fan and support the Lynx and all that stuff. But I have friends that on Lynx. I mean, so I think that that dynamic is what's helping me get through. But no, I Chelsea is special, and she'll continue to hopefully, get some more championships. That's the plan.
Do you think she could become a coach, or could we see the two of you maybe go against each other at some point? As coaches?
I actually think that she'll be a phenomenal coach, just because she has so much love to give to people. And I think that she inspires, people don't know this about Chelsea, but Chelsea was very, very different. And I think that
she still is. I remember she is not the easiest person to approach for interviews.
No, she's very, she's always been like that, even as a kid, very like reserved and quiet. And I remember we were in college and she was at Duke at the time and I was at Cal, and so, there was a reporter that asked her, are you and your cousin the same, or are you guys different? She says, no, we are way different. Alexis wants to argue about every single thing at my grandmother's house. And it's true. Like when we were growing up, I was the kid that wanted to be the lawyer, that wanted to make sure that my point was made. And Chelsea's just like, I don't care. So it's one of those things where, you hopefully we can continue to support each other. But I definitely think that she can be a coach.
So if we put the two of you together in a room, it would be a huge contrast in personality.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because, everybody always assumes that, our dads are brothers. So our dads are like the complete opposite too. It's weird. My dad is very much like Chelsea, in the sense that my dad's very reserved at times, and he has moments like everybody else that gets excited, but he's usually really kind of chill and laid back. And then her dad is a lot like me, where he's always fun loving and and happy and wants to have conversation. I'm a people person, so it's a weird dynamic.
And while we're having some fun talking about your cousin and sort of this rivalry you have with the Lynx and the Sparks, although if she were to join the Lynx, I imagine that allegiance would change in a hurry.
Yeah, I guess I would. I don't think I would have a choice but to support, I guess. But
it's like how Tanisha tells me she's a Lynx fan until they go up against her sister.
Yeah.
Who is now playing in Dallas. Yeah. But as much as we're joking about this, what do you think, whether it's the pro game or even just girls basketball, women's basketball in general, what do you think has to happen, or where do you see the next stage of growth? Because we've seen some examples of that. The WNBA is getting some more traction. The girls basketball scene, I know I've had employers in job interviews tell me that, yeah, we're most excited about women's basketball because our audience craves this. The Athletic added beat writers for every team. Where do you see that next stage of growth for the women's game?
It's a great question. I mean, a lot of things I think have to change. I think that people have to stop taking our game for granted. That's the very first thing. But
what do you mean by that, taking it for granted?
I think that people see women's, whether it be basketball players, tennis, whatever, they see women and they automatically assume that we're inferior, right? It's that thing where it's always the guy that can't make a basket that always says, well, I could take on Diana Taurasi, I can take on Alexis-Gray Lawson, I can take on this person.
The folks behind the keyboard.
Yeah, and you just are. It annoys you after a while because you're just like, come on, let's just be realistic here. And when you have, it's so weird because you get men's basketball players, and all my guy friends have always been super supportive of the girls.
Oh yeah, it's within that community. It's a big family because the NBA guys, they know how much the WNBA put in. I mean, Draymond Green, I remember he came out and said, "Yeah, I learn more watching the women's game than I do the men."
Yep.
So it's the players understand it, but like you said, it's getting the rest of the public on board.
Yeah, and I think it just needs to have more access, right? When you look at the WNBA in a general sense, right? You have the WNBA app, It's called League Pass.
League Pass. They're now doing fantasy.
Yeah.
They've started streaming their games on Twitter.
Yep, and then you obviously see, WNBA going into 2K now from the gaming standpoint.
After EA Sports did it for their version.
So you see these like the little things that are starting to get more of a push. It just needs to be seen. I think that's the biggest thing is us being seen, and how do you be seen, right? And having the good games on TV. Just like anywhere else, right? Like in an NBA game, the worst thing that you can do is you see two teams that you definitely don't want to watch, and you just flip the channel, right? Unless you're a diehard fan of that team, right? It's the same thing with anything else.
That may not be the case next season.
No, next season
with free agency, it's gonna be
the same
mayhem.
thing for next season, but
it's like grab the popcorn. It's gonna be a lot of fun, but
it's just access.
But I can see that. So in the WNBA, there's only 12 teams, so it's less likely you're going to run into a team like the Knicks.
Yeah.
Sorry, New York.
Yep.
But I get what you're saying. Because I remember I hadn't covered a WNBA game. I'd done some college and some high school games by that point, but an old friend of mine said, hey, you want to cover the Lynx? I said, okay. It was the Lynx and the Sparks. It was 2009, Lisa Leslie's last season, and it was right before Simone Augustus tore her ACL. But I just remember that, okay, maybe this doesn't have some qualities of the men's game, but having watched my first game in full, it was a blur. I don't remember anything about it, except that I think the Lynx won it. But I was hooked, and I still am, even though I'm on hiatus. Like, yeah, I'll watch the women's game if it's on, because I know they're going to put out a good product.
I think I want to say last year and the year before, I remember more guys on Twitter talking about the championship game more than any time else.
Last year's, so the Mystics Storm.
The year before last. Yep, 2017.
The Lynx Sparks round 2.
Yeah, like everybody loved it. It was
except you.
Except for me.
Except for me. I know we're bringing back.
Except for me, you bring back bad memories
for you. For everyone else, like Tisa and Tanisha, and everybody else, I'm sure they give you smack talk.
Yeah, they loved it.
They love to remind you of it, I imagine.
It's fun. It's weird, like everybody else. We went to the game where just this past game where Chelsea and the Sparks played the Lynx like earlier this season.
I think it was on ABC if I recall.
Yep. And I was actually courtside. We were sitting next to the Lynx, and I was joking with my players because I had KK and Ronnie with me, and they like, oh man, the Lynx about to win this, blah 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 blah. And of course they're joking and laughing with the Lynx,
not knowing the Sparks have a Lynx killer in Chelsea-Gray.
And then it's funny, the timeout happens. It was probably like 10, 15 seconds left in the game. Timeout happens, they're down 1. Chelsea comes on the floor, and I'm actually playing with Job at the time, and my wife says, Chelsea, she's trying to get your attention. And Chelsea goes, I'm about to get this. And I said, all right. Literally 5 seconds later, she scores. And they like, oh, no, how did that happen? And I'm like, it's that great magic.
That's Chelsea.
It's that Chelsea.
And what a great story for her. I know you have a great one as well, but you tore your ACL, came back. I know the same thing happened to her, and she's turned into a bona fide player. I mean, she's not the most recognized name with Candace Parker and the Aguma case, but if you ignore Chelsea-Gray, she's going to make you pay for it.
Well, and I think I think her story is pretty incredible. I think that people don't get enough credit for coming up after me and being in my family. I have a lot of younger sisters. Actually, I have 3 younger sisters, a younger brother, 3 younger brothers. Yeah, that's a lot of us. And it's not easy being my sister because everybody expects, once you're, playing basketball, that you're supposed to be like this. You have to be like Alexis. If you're not like Alexis, then you're just you're just average, right? And that was hard for my younger sisters. And it sucked for me at being their big sister because you want them to enjoy this game from that standpoint. And I don't think that it was probably easy for Chelsea either because she was still my cousin. And at the time, I was at Cal and she was at St. Mary's, and, she still had big shoes to fill, right? And then, she gets she gets to Duke and she has success at Duke, but I'm still who I am at Cal, right? And then, obviously she gets to the league and she has some bad luck with injuries and different stuff. So she really, I'm most proud of not the fact that she got to the league, because I knew that she could get to the league. I think I'm more proud of like her perseverance, how she pushes through adversity. And I think that that's kind of maybe like the gray code, right? Is the adversity piece. It's just pushing through and understanding that it's not about you. It's about everyone else. At times it can be about you, but it's really not about you. And I think our family has done a fantastic job of like teaching all of us that, this life is about what you can give to it, right? We all have a ministry. And that's my opinion. Everyone in this world has some type of ministry. Some people's is, communication, to the masses, right? Like a pastor, right? And I'm like a pastor of my church. Basketball is my church. Como is like my church, the Como church, right? And then I'm the pastor. My coaches are the deacons, and my players are the members. Right? And if those members leave, then there's no church. And I have to be aware of what I'm speaking into them, because what I say, they're going to listen and they're going to take into, and I have to be okay with what comes back and the feedback that comes back, right? The one thing that I love about, I go to True Vine in Oakland, California, and my pastor is Zach Carey, right? And he says, he has this thing where it's like Talk Back Mondays, right? And it's the feedback that he gets from church on Sunday. And I think that that's so important because, right, like we can't be okay with just giving out the message when we're ready to receive the message, right? And so it's that dynamic piece. I think that's special.
Well, you've given us a fascinating oral history of your background with basketball, and I want to close with this. In your playing career, as I look at the murals and all the teammates you got to play with on the national team, in college and pro, who is your favorite teammate to play with, and who is your favorite athlete to play against?
Favorite teammate? I'm probably going to have to go with the Fab Five at Cal. And that's obviously...
and who was on that Fab Five?
So it was myself, Devin A. Hampton, Chantrell Sneed, Janae Morris when she was at Cal, and then she went off to San Diego State, and then Ashley Walker. So I think that was my favorite just because I've known them since we were been kids, and we kind of dreamed this plan, and it kind of came in fruition. So, I would say that was my favorite teammates to play against. I would say any Stanford team. Yeah. Because Stanford, I mean, when you think, when I think back in my 4 years, I got to play against 4 different generations of basketball players. So I got the Candace Wiggins when Candace Wiggins was there. Mm-hmm. I got Raj. She was guarding me half the time. Kayla Peterson. So I had a
Nneka Ogwumike. You had to go against her too.
Shanae.
That's right. Shanae came in.
Yeah. So
just as you were.
Yeah. So it was a great dynamic of Stanford players that had came through, and I got to go against all of them, and I didn't always come out successful in all of them. But I always represented Cal the way that I needed to.
Well, it's the rivalry. I mean, the football game's a big game, and the history that Stanford has and that California has built. And
absolutely. I'm actually looking forward to this year because now technically, even though Charmaine is at Cal, she's technically still Stanford. So you got Stanford going against Stanford. At the same time, she's with Cal. I'm going to like that dynamic a little bit.
Then going up against her, did you imagine that Roz would become the broadcaster that she is?
No.
Because I have to imagine Wiggins going pro, Ogwumike, and Kayla Peterson, that probably didn't surprise you. And then you have Roz, who...
No, Roz,
is now one of the biggest names in broadcasting.
Roz is probably one of the most incredible personalities that you can meet, though. It's funny that she said that because I remember... I was on this crazy run when I was going 30. I was scoring 30 every game. And I was in...
You really were Andrea before Andrea.
Yeah, yeah. And then I had the 58-point game against Oregon State. and it was incredible. The first person I called was Roz. And I remember calling her and she said, "Did you just call me to brag?"
So you knew each other before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So she was like, "Did you just call me to brag?" And I was like, "Nah, I just want to just like try to find out what happened at Oregon or whatever." Because they had played Oregon that night. And at that time, Oregon was like upsetting people for whatever reason. And they had lost to Oregon. And I was like, what the heck happened? So I kind of like just wanted to call to let her know. But I just wanted to make sure she understood that I scored big. It was like 2 or 3 overtimes too. That was like a tiring game. Yeah, it was crazy.
Probably your best memory on the college circuit?
Definitely. Definitely.
Scoring 58
Definitely.
and bragging to Roz.
Yes, and bragging to Roz.
Well, I hope you get to brag about many more accomplishments to come at Como Park, and who knows, maybe we'll see you back out on the court someday. But Alexis, thanks for giving us this oral history and this insight about your connection with this sport. And all I can say is basketball is greater with you in it.
I appreciate that.
So that was Alexis-Gray Lawson. You'll see her on the court next winter for the Como Park Cougars. They're coming off a 23-3 season and a top 10 ranking in Class 3A. And some new section opponents.
Yeah.
So we'll see if they can hang with the likes of Simley and St. Croix Lutheran this upcoming season. Should be a lot of fun. And stay tuned for more details on our guest lineup for Mic'd Up Sports. And if you'd like to be a guest, just contact us at tsbtelevision@gmail.com. For everyone here, I'm Mike Beaton. Thanks for watching the inaugural episode of Mic'd Up Sports.
If you'd like to support TSB Television sports programming, check us out at patreon.com/TSB Television or paypal.me/TSB Television.